John Edwards stood at the podium, his bright smile and perfectly styled hair radiating confidence. The North Carolina senator had charm, a powerful voice, and a message of hope that resonated with many Americans. As he spoke to the crowd, promising to fight poverty and bring change, flashes of cameras lit up the evening sky. But behind the polished speeches and applause, John's life was falling apart. It all started during his 2008 presidential campaign. Late nights, high stress, and endless travel had pulled him away from his wife, Elizabeth, who was battling terminal cancer. John met Rielle Hunter, a videographer hired to document his campaign. She was lively, charismatic, and had a way of making him feel invincible. At first, their conversations were casual, just a few laughs over coffee. But soon, the meetings turned into something more. Rielle's presence became a dangerous escape for John, a break from the pressure of politics and the weight of his family struggles. One night after a campaign rally, John and Rielle found themselves alone in a hotel room. The lines blurred, the whispers grew softer, and the affair began. John thought he could keep everything under control. He was wrong. Rielle became pregnant, and the walls started to close in. Panic gripped John as he imagined the headlines: "Presidential hopeful's scandalous affair." He couldn't let it happen. Not while his wife was fighting for her life. Not while the country looked up to him as a symbol of integrity. He turned to Andrew Young, a loyal campaign aide. "Andrew," John said one evening, pacing the room, "I need your help. I need you to take care of this." Andrew's eyes widened as John explained the situation. "You want me to claim the child as yours," John interrupted, his voice firm. "Rielle needs to stay out of sight. No one can know." Andrew hesitated, but loyalty outweighed reason. He agreed. The plan seemed airtight at first. Andrew publicly admitted to being the father, and Rielle disappeared into the shadows. But secrets don't stay hidden for long. Tabloid reporters caught wind of the affair and started digging. Rumors of late-night meetings, hidden payments, and a mysterious pregnant woman swirled. The National Enquirer sent photographers to stake out hotels and airports, determined to catch John in the act. One night, John slipped out of a campaign stop, thinking he was unnoticed. He drove to a small Beverly Hills hotel, where Rielle was staying. As he walked through the back entrance, a flash of light blinded him. A photographer had been waiting. "Mr. Edwards," the man shouted, "are you here to see Rielle Hunter? Is the baby yours?" John froze, his heart pounding. He ducked into the stairwell, sprinting up to Rielle's room. Inside, she was pacing, her face pale. "They're outside," John whispered, locking the door. "What do we do now?" Rielle asked, her voice trembling. John didn't have an answer. The photos were published within days. The media frenzy was relentless. John denied everything at first, calling the reports absurd lies. But the evidence kept piling up. Financial records showing hush money, witness testimonies, and finally, the birth of a baby girl who looked strikingly like him. Elizabeth, his wife, confronted him in their home. "Is it true, John?" she asked, her voice cracking. He couldn't meet her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said quietly. Elizabeth's tears fell freely. "You've ruined everything." Outside their home, reporters camped out, shouting questions and snapping pictures. John could feel his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. The scandal didn't just threaten his marriage, it jeopardized his entire career. John knew the law was catching up to him. There were whispers of campaign funds being used to cover up the affair. If proven true, it could mean prison. Desperate, John called Andrew again. "You've got to stick to the story," he said. Andrew hesitated. "I've done enough for you, John. I can't keep this up." John's tone hardened. "If this gets out, we're all finished." But Andrew wasn't so sure anymore. The lies had grown too big, and the pressure was too much. He began keeping a secret record of everything. Phone calls, emails, even the payments. As investigators dug deeper, John's world unraveled further. His once loyal allies began to turn on him, and Elizabeth, though still publicly supportive, grew more distant. The pressure mounted with every passing day. The FBI started asking questions about the misuse of campaign funds. John could feel the walls closing in, but he still refused to admit defeat. The storm was far from over, and the truth was about to explode in ways no one could predict. John sat in his softly lit office, staring at the television. Every major network was examining his downfall, airing clips of his speeches alongside scandalous headlines. His name was a punchline on late-night shows, and his once adoring supporters now questioned his every move. But it wasn't the media that haunted him, it was the threatening federal investigation. Andrew Young had reached his breaking point. The man who once shielded John was now feeling the weight of his own guilt. Sitting in his living room with his wife, Sherry, Andrew finally spoke. Sherry nodded, her face lined with worry. "Then stop protecting him. Tell the truth." Andrew began compiling a dossier, emails, text messages, and bank records, all evidence of the cover-up. He contacted federal investigators, knowing his cooperation might save him from prosecution. When the FBI came knocking on John's door, he wasn't surprised. They had questions about nearly $1 million in campaign funds that had allegedly been funneled to Riel. John knew he was in trouble, but he wasn't ready to surrender. In a stark, cold interrogation room, John faced two federal agents. Their questions were sharp, their tone unrelenting. "Mr. Edwards, did you authorize the use of campaign funds to conceal your affair with Ms. Hunter?" one agent asked, sliding a document across the table. John studied the paper, his hands trembling slightly. I didn't know about that," he stammered. The agent raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying the payments happened without your knowledge?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." John forced himself to meet the agent's gaze, but he could feel his resolve cracking. The agents exchanged a glance. They knew they had him cornered. While John fought to save himself, Elizabeth remained at home, battling her illness and the public humiliation. Despite everything, she refused to let the scandal define her. One evening, she called a journalist from a major newspaper. "I want to speak," she said. The resulting interview was raw and powerful. Elizabeth spoke of betrayal, heartbreak, and resilience. She refused to defend John but also wouldn't let her family's pain be reduced to tabloid fodder. Her words resonated with the public, drawing sympathy for her struggle. But for John, it was another reminder of what he had lost. As the investigation intensified, so did the media's obsession. Riel, who had stayed silent for months, suddenly agreed to an interview with a major news outlet. Sitting across from the reporter, she smiled faintly. "I never wanted any of this," she said. "I loved John, and I thought he loved me. But now, I don't know what's real anymore." The interview aired nationwide, sparking even more outrage and fascination. The public couldn't look away from the train wreck unfolding in real time. In the months leading up to the trial, John's legal team scrambled to build a defense. They argued that the payments to Riel were personal gifts, not campaign funds. But the prosecution had a mountain of evidence, and Andrew Young's testimony was damning. One evening, John met with his lawyers in a dimly lit conference room. "We need a strategy," he said, his voice firm. His lead attorney sighed. "John, the evidence is strong. The best we can do is try to minimize the damage." John clenched his fists. He had spent his entire career fighting for justice, and now he was the one on trial. As the trial date approached, new revelations emerged. Leaked emails suggested that John had been more involved in the cover-up than he admitted. Former staffers came forward with stories of intimidation and deceit. The public, once divided on his guilt, now turned against him almost entirely. But behind the scenes, John wasn't giving up. He started making secret calls, reaching out to old allies and pulling every string he could. He wasn't just fighting to avoid prison. He was fighting to salvage what little remained of his legacy. One night, as rain poured down outside, John met Riel in a secluded motel. She sat across from him, her expression unreadable. "You dragged me into this mess," she said quietly. "I'm trying to fix it," John replied. "You're trying to save yourself," Riel shot back. "What about me? What about our daughter?" John looked away, unable to answer. The weight of his choices pressed down on him, and for the first time, he felt truly powerless. A week later, as the rainstorm that had soaked the East Coast cleared, the scandal reached a boiling point. A secret recording of John Edwards surfaced, a voicemail he had left for Riel during the height of their affair. On the tape, John's voice was calm but urgent. "Riel, you have to stay out of sight. Don't talk to anyone, Not even Andrew. If anyone asks, deny everything. I'll handle it. Just trust me." The recording was played on every major news network, sending shockwaves through the nation. It was no longer a question of whether John had been involved in the cover-up. He was caught, and his lies were unraveling. Elizabeth sat in her living room, the television illuminating her tired face. She listened to the recording in silence, gripping the arms of her chair. Her once vibrant spirit had been worn down by betrayal, illness, and public scrutiny, but she wasn't broken. That evening, she called John to the house. He arrived hesitantly, knowing what awaited him. As he stepped into the room, Elizabeth stood. Her frail figure was dwarfed by her anger. "I heard the tape," she said, her voice trembling but firm. How could you drag all of us into this mess?" John looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," he murmured. Elizabeth slammed her hand on the table, startling him. You didn't mean to lie to me? To the world? To destroy our family?" "I'm trying to fix it," John said weakly. "No, you're trying to save yourself," Elizabeth snapped, echoing Riel's earlier words. "But you've already lost everything that matters." She turned and walked away, leaving John standing alone in the room, a man consumed by his own choices. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the benches, their pens ready to record every word. John sat at the defense table, his once confident demeanor replaced by quiet determination. The prosecution began with a blistering opening statement. "This case is about betrayal," the lead prosecutor declared. "Betrayal of trust, betrayal of family, and betrayal of the American people." John Edwards used campaign funds to hide his affair and protect his political ambitions. "We will prove it." As witnesses took the stand, the weight of John's actions became clear. Andrew Young recounted the night John begged him to take the fall, his voice steady but filled with bitterness. Financial experts detailed the money trail that led directly to Riel. John's defense team fought back, painting him as a flawed but decent man who had made mistakes under pressure. They argued that the payments were personal gifts from wealthy donors who wanted to protect his family, not political contributions. But the jury's faces remained stony, their reactions unreadable. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy reached a fever pitch. Protesters gathered, holding signs that read "Justice for Elizabeth" and "No one is above the law." Riel was photographed leaving her home, holding her daughter tightly. The child's face was blurred in the photos, but the resemblance to John was undeniable. Elizabeth, now too ill to attend the trial, watched from her hospital bed. She had refused to speak publicly again, but her silence spoke volumes. One night, as the trial stretched into its third week, John received a call from a powerful figure in Washington. The man's voice was low and measured. "John, there's a way out of this," he said. "Plead guilty to a lesser charge. Serve a few months, and this all goes away. You can rebuild." John's heart raced. It was tempting, an escape from the relentless review and the threat of a lengthy prison sentence. But he hesitated. Pleading guilty meant admitting defeat, and he wasn't sure he could face that. "I'll think about it," he said finally, his voice shaky. The call ended, leaving John alone in the darkness, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The courtroom was silent as the jury returned with their decision. John Edwards stood, his hands clasped tightly, his face pale. The judge asked the foreman, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor," the foreman replied. The charges against John included conspiracy, accepting illegal campaign contributions, and false statements. One by one, the foreman read the decisions. For the most serious charges, John was found not guilty, but the jury was deadlocked on others. The case ended in a mistrial. While John avoided prison, his public image was shattered beyond repair. Outside the courthouse, John addressed the media. "I made mistakes," he said, his voice trembling. "Grave mistakes. I failed my family, my supporters, and myself. For that, I am deeply sorry." The words sounded hollow, even to him. Elizabeth passed away later that year, surrounded by her children. In her final days, she wrote a letter to her children, urging them to live with honesty and integrity, no matter how difficult the path. "You cannot undo the past," she wrote, "but you can decide what kind of person you want to be moving forward. Always choose truth. It will hurt less in the end." Riel retreated from the spotlight, raising her daughter in private. She later spoke about the affair in a rare interview, expressing regret for her role in the scandal. "I thought I was in love," she said. "But I see now how much pain we caused. I wish I had made better choices." Years later, John lived quietly, far from the political stage. He spent his days helping low-income families through pro bono legal work. It was his way of seeking redemption, though he knew he could never fully atone for the pain he had caused. Sitting on his balcony one evening, John looked at an old family photo. Elizabeth's smile was as radiant as ever. He whispered to himself, "I should have been better, for her, for all of them." The story of John Edwards serves as a cautionary narrative about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the fragility of trust, and the enduring strength of truth. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to Kendry Storytelling and History for more engaging stories and historical content. Like and comment your thought on this story and share to your loved ones.